Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes.
Welcome back to the Untitled Space Podcast. It's me, Nick, and it's DJ. Woo, woo, woo! Get that energy in the house. What's up, DJ?
Oh my gosh!
I'm sure you've never heard that joke before. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm totally unique.
That's just a newly fresh joke. Never heard it once.
Yeah. Okay. How you doing?
How
man?
have you been? Oh, I've been great. How about you?
Yeah. I think I have a problem.
And
what
is
I
that?
think this
Do you
is
need
the show
counseling?
where we need to talk about it. I do need counseling. Is DJ's counseling sessions open?
Yes. I can write you in for right now.
Do you charge a nickel, or how do you do the billing?
Typically it's my 2 cents.
Okay, just 2 cents. I can afford that. Okay. So I love space, and it's becoming a problem.
Okay. Go on.
It's interrupted my sleep patterns. Every single thought is captive about Starship and just how beautiful and stainless steel it is. And sometimes I rub it at night, and it just feels so nice. And I just love Starship so much, and SpaceX in general. Yeah, it's a clinical problem. Do you have any drugs you can offer me?
It sounds like a very unhealthy obsession. So, this is what I'm going to suggest.
Okay.
A daily dose of Today at Starbase. How about that?
Hey! Oh, there you go. Nice product placement, DJ. I appreciate it. Yeah, for all of you who don't know and haven't been watching this channel, which I know, there are like 600 subs here, but like nobody watches any of the content, which is totally fine because I appreciate you guys' support, the ones who are sticking around. I started up a new show on this channel, Tales of Space, called Today at Starbase, because I am just obsessed with what's going on down in Starbase. I was originally, like this time last week, passively interested in Starbase and what's going on in Boca, but I just didn't really realize how much stuff's going on down there. And when I started looking into it, I realized it could easily fill a short daily show. And so now we have Today at Starbase, starring yours truly and anyone else who ever wants to do it. Because DJ, I need help some days. And that was my sly request to have him help me, but that's all right. Yeah, there's just so much going down there. And like you can say generally, okay, SN18 moved, but like there wasn't any big news. But like when you get down into it, there's so much stuff that's changing, and the exciting part is all out in the open. I feel like with Apple and Tesla, like it all kind of happens behind closed doors, and we speculate about, what might come out, what changes might happen, what's it going to be. But with SpaceX, it's just all out in the open for anyone to take pictures of, anyone to take videos of, anyone to see, people to like visit and like hang on the chain link fence and just look in. Like it's just there, and there's just so much going on. And I thought when I first started thinking, oh, maybe I could do like a weekly news show about just Starbase, because I know plenty of people do like weekly news shows, with the greater space stuff, with throwing in NASA and ULA and whatever, all this different stuff. I was like, I wonder if I could just do one on just Starbase or Boca Chica. And the more I looked into it, I was like, yeah, I can totally do a weekly show. And the more I looked into that, I was like, yeah, I could totally do a daily show. And so I was like, let's give it a week and see if I could, get enough news every day for a daily show. And so far, we're on day 3.
And not lose your mind editing every day.
Hey, it's been really healthy. What I've always needed was like a something that's like I can talk about a lot. For Drew, that's like EV and tech videos. But like I've always wanted to make that daily regular content, and I've just been like lacking a medium or something to talk about it with. So this is really healthy. I've been able to get my workflow down to about 2 hours or so, 2.5 hours, between scripting, researching, editing, recording, all that fun stuff. So it's been a lot of fun, and you should totally join me because it's totally fun. Yeah. So that great transition you provided, DJ, I really appreciate it, because oh my goodness, down in Starbase, this week at Starbase, there's tons of stuff. First off, SN15 is now in its final resting place. Rest in peace, SN15. Well, in one piece, not in pieces.
Oh, yes. That's the big headline right there. One Piece.
Well, technically they did take the Raptors off and, dismantle a few
Yeah.
things, but mostly one piece. But yeah, basically they moved it kind of out in the back 40 of the facility down there in Boca Chica, and it's just now on display now. So just like, I think just like the original Falcon 9 rocket that made it back is on display in Hawthorne, California, I think SN15 has a really good chance of just sticking around forever, being that kind of first successful test vehicle. Probably only to be eclipsed by the first returning orbital mission. So yeah, that was kind of fun to see them just move that. And what I love about SpaceX is just like they just do it, right? Like I feel like if NASA or ULA or Lockheed or whatever wanted to move one of their past flight articles into a museum type scenario, it's like at least 6 months of planning, 3 months of environmental impact, and all this stuff.
It would just take about like a year and a half, 2 years in total just to move something that they have no use for at this point.
Exactly. And
whereas
SpaceX
for SpaceX,
did it in an afternoon.
Yeah, that, and it's not like it's unusable for them either. They're just like, you know what, you're nice in one piece. Let's just savor you, put you over here,
keep you that way.
You're Starhopper V2, except you might not
Yes.
become a weather instrument.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, poor little Hopper is basically a weather instrument and a camera platform at this point, which it's kind of cool that Hoppy has kind of gotten a whole different lease on life, and I think SN15 is just gonna probably rust away, as it's pretty humid down there. But oh well.
Well, it is stainless steel, so.
I haven't gotten good authority that it could rust, so we'll say we'll give it a bit longer than regular steel, but I think it'll start. To
It'll take a while. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So the other thing, which I'm nerding out about all this. So like the most I ever was really excited about out of Boca news wise was like an actual test or like a preparation for a test or maybe even like a pressure test. None of that happened this week, and yet there's still like tons of stuff to talk about. So yay!
It's like all the small little details. Whenever you get down into it, it's like every day.
Yeah, it's like a deep rabbit hole, and I know people are even deeper in this rabbit hole than I am. So like, yikes! Send a rope if you have an extra one. I might need help out of this at some point. Basically, like SpaceX is taking this week, pretty much from what I can tell, to kind of build out their ground infrastructure. They've kind of been moving so fast, getting up to SN15, and not necessarily ignoring the other parts. To make a spaceship, you have to make the spaceship, and then you have to make the equipment to support the spaceship when it takes off and lands, right? Like it's not just the spaceship. It's not just an airplane. It's the airport systems with the runways and the guys with the gas trucks and all that stuff. So they needed to take some time to kind of build this all out. And I think it's probably a perfect time to do it because right now they're likely making the jump from suborbital hops to orbital tests. And I think that is going to be one of the biggest distinctions in the history books for SpaceX as far as the development of the Starship program. Obviously, making it to the moon and Mars will be bigger milestones, but at least in the development phase, moving from a fairly easy, 15 click or 10 click hop, where you're going up and then you belly flop down and then pivot and land, it's great and impressive, and like it's still insane that a building-sized multi-tens of tons vehicle can do that. But it obviously needs to get to orbit sooner than later. Yeah. And in order to do that, unfortunately, we can't just rely on single Starship launches because for all those who don't know, which I don't know if you're watching the show, why you wouldn't know, but Starship is not just one vehicle. It is the Starship orbital piece and then also the BFR booster kind of booster pack. And that is a little bit taller than the whole Starship. So when you have the Starship sitting on top of like a big booster, it's a behemoth. And at least as of recently, there wasn't anything to move around to stack that big. And so it was kind of getting to the point where if they wanted to do more orbital stuff or any orbital stuff, they needed to take some time out and upgrade their infrastructure. So that's what we've seen them do this week. Tons of fun stuff. But again, pretty nerdy.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm talking a lot, DJ. So feel free to
you're
interject
good.
if you have
Well,
anything to add.
While you're out here with it.
Yes.
So,
why don't you do the honors?
all right. So, looking back at it, just quick date on it. Our third episode was on May 5th, 2020. So here's to just a little over a year with a little bit of gaps.
Just a few. Okay, we're
Cheers.
on our 18th episode by the time this comes out.
Something
So
like
we
that.
haven't done super well, but we've been having fun, and I tell you, there's gonna be a lot of more regular space content now that I'm obsessed with it. Yeah. So ground equipment being built, not the flashiest thing, not the sexiest thing, but like this is the stuff that needs to happen before that exciting stuff can happen. And so it's kind of fun to like watch this all get built out. I wasn't really alive when they were building out the Kennedy Space Center. Actually, I really wasn't alive when they were building out the Kennedy Space Center. Last thing I remember was
half
SLS.
the world wasn't.
This is true. The last I checked, the last like big ground infrastructure equipment project that I distinctly remember is SLS's $1 billion tower. So anything beyond that's an improvement in my book.
The fact that SpaceX's entire operations down there has probably been that maybe double, but they spent that on a whole program, not just one tower.
Mm-hmm. We love you, Starship. We don't love you as much, SLS. Yeah, so this tower, SpaceX is building their own tower, and this is probably the fastest tower I've ever I have ever noticed coming together. It was literally this time last week, as of recording, we're on Wednesday. I guess Tuesday of last week. Literally 8 days ago. It was just foundational like pylons and concrete and like underground stuff. And then mid last week they moved in the first segment of this tower, and each of these segments is between 100 and 150 feet. I haven't seen a good estimate, but that's what it looks like to me, about 100 to 150 feet tall. And so they brought in the first segment, and then over the weekend they brought in I think Friday they brought in the second segment, and then like 2 days later they brought in the third segment. So like this thing went from like nothing to like taller than most skyscrapers in like a week.
It's going up fast, and like I didn't realize looking at it that it was going to be like at a diamond to the orbital launch table until yesterday. RGV posted a aerial of it with the pylons right beside it. And I was like, oh wow. And then also I'm looking at these cherry pickers beside it, and the large one with the big sprawling tires, and I'm sitting here like, oh wow.
These are big boys. Yeah, and I think for me personally, the launch tower was kind of something I couldn't really comprehend, I guess. And I think we even talked about this like maybe a month and a half ago or so. Like, how on earth are they going to catch this big booster? Because obviously Elon's big plan here is to take off with the Starship and BFR underneath it. Starship gets to orbit, BFR does the flip just like the Falcon 9, but instead of returning to a drone ship, it returns back to base. And in order to do that, we were all expecting to have landing legs just like the Falcon 9. But Elon said, oh, no, we're going to catch this thing in midair. And everyone was just like, myself included. I was definitely skeptical. I was like, Elon?
I mean, I still am, but it's like, hey, you do you, Elon. If you can pull this off, more power.
Yeah. Because like you gotta think of like the engineering challenges involved in catching a BFR in flight. So Falcon 9 is like 230 feet tall, and its error, it has like a whole soccer field basically. Those drone ships are like the size of a soccer field. Like there is plenty of room for error. Obviously it's a huge spaceship, but I guess rocket, not necessarily a spaceship, it doesn't go to orbit. But it's this huge rocket that is a whole soccer field to land on, whole soccer pitch. Or football pitch for you UK people. And it has this huge air ellipse, and you see it sometimes land on this side of the circle or on that side of the circle or in the middle of the circle. You know, it kind of varies. and that's the point, and that's why they have a huge landing pad out there, basically. But if they're gonna catch this thing, like they got to do an order of magnitudes better job at navigating and flying this rocket.
Yeah.
Now, I really think if there's any rocket that can do it, it's going to be BFR, because its minimum thrust point is below the weight, so it can actually hover. Unlike
Doesn't
the
have
Falcon
to do a
9,
suicide burn.
exactly. The Falcon 9 has to do a suicide burn, so it has literally no spare time, measured in infinite milliseconds. Like it has to start up exactly when it needs to get the perfect landing and not crash. But thankfully, because BFR has like literally at last count 29 Raptor engines for the first few, and then we'll get to 31 eventually. Plenty of Raptor engines which have deep throttling availability. It can hover. So the current postulation is it comes in for a landing similar to Falcon 9, but instead of doing a hover slam, it'll kind of do a gradual hover, and then it'll hover there for a little bit.
Yeah.
And it will be able to do those fine-tuning adjustments, likely with hot gas or cold gas thrusters, likely with some gimbaling, but very slowly move towards the tower. And I guess in my mind, I kind of got that. And the reason why they want to, catch it is because they don't have to carry the landing legs all the way up there and all the way back down. Makes sense from like a weight management perspective. But like I was just trying to envision what was going to catch this, because at this point, this is like still a over 250 foot tall rocket, which is still weighing over
And
10 or 20 tons. We don't know the exact weight, but it's not.
and we haven't
light.
even seen this thing fully stacked yet to see how truly massive the scale is. I mean, we've seen the upper stage, but this is like that and a half.
Yeah, it is. It's unreal how big this is going to be. And so, like, I was just like, I can hardly even fathom the scale of a Falcon 9. I can hardly even fathom the scale of just the Starship. How on earth is some kind of structure going to catch a BFR booster? And so it wasn't really until they started throwing all this stuff up, and I was like, oh, wow, that is a massive structure. The launch tower is huge. As a former president would say, it was huge. It was bigly and beautiful. It was huge. Yeah. And just the speed at which they assembled it. Now, obviously, they've been working on it at the other build site for a little while, probably a month and a half or so, and they already have good work on the other segments as well. So, but it's just the fact like they put them together like Legos in a matter of days. Crazy stuff. Yeah. So, DJ, I sent you a picture. I talked about it in today's Today at Space on Wednesday the 2nd. This is probably the best mock-up that I've seen for what the arrest system will look like. Basically, the tower is a square, but it's at a 45-degree angle towards the landing and launch pad. And so it is kind of cattywampus, basically, just like a diamond.
Yeah.
And that allows there to be 3 points of contact fairly easily for a whole structure that can like move on top of this tower. And this structure is going to be massive. We just saw today, the reason why this is all kind of in the news is because some people finally saw, I think it was, I can't remember his name, but anyway, some guy took a picture of what the rails are looking like right now, but like they're like rails on the vertical posts that are going to allow this whole structure to move up and down. And using a series of pulleys and weights, they should be able to absorb a lot of the energy of a landing booster without springs or hydraulics or anything, just using pulleys and gravity. I think that's really that's really what clicked with me personally. It was like, okay, they're not going to have this be like a rigid structure that's going to have to like take a harder landing. They're not going to have to like do really high pressure hydraulics or springs. Like it's just a
It'll be like a little bungee
pulley
jump.
system. It's like a crane. It's like a crane basically. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably it's much better than what I thought was gonna happen. But I'm still thinking like on the rocket side of it, like we're gonna have 4 grid fins, and I mean, yeah, these things are massive compared to the current grid fins we have. But there's 4 of them. You want to catch them at the elbow joints. So, I mean, if it's 45 degrees off axis from the tower itself, what kind of strain is that going to put on the grid fins and the rocket. So I'm like, I think they're still gonna have some type of thing that goes around it, more or less than the forks idea, like is in this image. Whoa, I'm just getting like 3 of these. Oh, okay. There's other images.
I just sent you some slightly different images from this same concept. And check out the Today at Starbase show and freeze frame on these screenshots that just sent DJ, because I'm not going to remember to put them in like 20 minutes of this show. Sorry. I'm lazy. Basically, this idea is it does its landing burn and it hovers. And as it hovers, it moves closer towards the crane, or like these kind of claw-looking things. And the claw-looking things will then slowly kind of close together, allowing it to be, not a lot of differential speeds, and have some room for bumps and cushions. So it can close all the way in on the 2 grid fins, and it's only going to be supported by what looks like 2 grid fins with this design. So not even the 4 grid fins would be supporting it, just the 2.
Yeah.
From a structural standpoint, I have to question this and just be like, really, Elon? Do you think 4 of these grid fins can really hold like a partially filled BFR? Like, I don't know. It sounds like a lot, but
it's gonna be like trying to make a toothpick bridge or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, we have seen those pictures of the single grid fin for the BFR booster being like the size of a semi bed. So it's like, well, I guess these things are kind of big.
Yeah,
maybe they can handle it.
But like I said, I'm still just like, I mean, they're folded down to begin with as it is. I'm just worried about that joint. Like it's gotta have some strong lockouts, because ooh boy,
totally. It might be one of the strongest joints we see on a moving vehicle.
Absolutely.
Lots of weights there.
That will be massive, and you've got to think, like, they're building this tower. Mm-hmm. I wonder if they're gonna build this one as just the let's launch from this one, and always just leave this one nice and clean, and then build another one nearby after they've built this one, learn their lesson for actually making the launch tower, and then implementing that catching system on it. Because if they lose their orbital launch tower during testing, it's not like they can just really fly it from somewhere else, because they don't have another orbital launch tower at the time. Whereas if you don't have a landing spot, you can still kind of just soft land it somewhere else on the water or something like that. So I'm assuming they're going to build a second one sometime fairly soon after they get this one built.
I would highly agree with that. I mean, they're kind of already working on their Deimos landing platform, which will launch and landing platform, which is a decommissioned oil rig that they're converting into what will amount to be another one of these launch towers at some point. But that's not going to be ready till next year. I will say there's pretty much no missions that can be flown out of Boca Chica Starbase, unfortunately. Just the way
that tiny little sliver of clearance.
It's just like a little sliver between the Bahamas and Cuba and Florida, basically. And they have I believe it's a 3-degree window of inclination that they can choose. And so just because of that, I would say this is all just test stuff, obviously, for the moment. So I can't see many useful payloads going out of Starbase. Now, as much as I love Starbase and I love the name and I love the fact that SpaceX renamed a town to just be Starbase. That's
when you have enough money and enough influence that you could just rename a town without actually renaming a town legally.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, totally. Starbase Texas is in the works for the legal perspective too. But anyway, this is it feels like this is only ever going to be a big testing facility. I think at some point, once they figure out what they're doing, they'll probably end up building something out at the Cape and likely something out at Vandenberg. I don't know. Unless it is also a huge possibility that overfly stuff gets changed. Because I would
think within the next 10, 15 years, overflies, especially with a vehicle like this, if it gets proven out, I don't think it will be as much of a issue. Now, well, let me rephrase. I think it won't be as much of an issue for landing much as it will be for taking off. It might still take a little bit for that. Because, I mean, if you're coming in for a landing and you're gonna crater somewhere, you're probably gonna like lose it in high altitude and burn up on the reentry. Or if you crater, you're gonna crater in one spot, and it's less risky to the complete surrounding areas. But launch, on the other hand, if you have to trigger that abort system, or not abort, the destruction.
Yeah, flight termination system.
Yep, there we go. That's what I was looking for. If you got to trigger that, you're stretching over like probably 10 miles or more.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would agree with you there that like takeoff's definitely going to be a little more risky. I mean, just look at the Challenger disaster. Like they had stuff scattered all across the country, like Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma. Like it was just all over the country had space shuttle parts because it was at really high altitudes when it disintegrated. So things just went everywhere. I would say though, I think Starship is going to become so reliable that just like I guess I don't really know what it was like in the 20s with airplanes, but like I can imagine people be like, don't fly over my house, you might crash, and then like they kind of figure out, okay, it doesn't crash that often, and when it does, you're instantly famous on the news. So there's that.
Also, I mean, like we fly over everybody every day in orbit. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a bit different, but when you look at the distance between Brownsville and say you're going directly over Miami, that is like, I mean, if you look at the flight animations on a regular stream, it's already like lost its fairings. Like by the time you go over these little tiny islands off of Florida, like past this Freeport Island or whatever this is, and it's before it gets acquisition of Signal Bermuda. So I mean that's like double, almost triple the distance in the Gulf of Mexico. So it's like,
that's true.
How much do they need to prove? I mean, because if they're going to do FTS, it's probably going to be like before it passes the Texas line straight north of it. Mm-hmm. At the latest, it's like the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
So.
And and I would say, I'm not saying that they can do like polar orbits from Starbase anytime soon. That goes like right over Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Wichita, Omaha. That goes over some major cities right there. So I would not say that, but like at least opening it up for the whole Gulf, like as long as you're at a certain altitude by a certain time. Say like hitting New Orleans, you have to be over about the Kármán line or whatever. And I think, go ahead.
Even for those polar orbits, you're going south. I mean, but then you'd be going over.
Yeah,
you'd be then going over Mexico. But I mean, right there at Brownsville, you're just right. If you're going straight south, you're riding like the coast on the outside. You're over water until you get down to Martinez de la Torre or whatever, and then you go over the peninsula basically, or go over the whatever.
That's true.
But that one I could see that polar is probably not the best idea out of that. But we also do polar back out of Florida now, and you look at how that happens. I mean, they dog-leg it over, but even then, it's still going over stuff.
And I think Starship, you bring up a good point with the dogleg. I think Starship has so much kind of headroom as far as like Delta V and stuff.
Yeah.
That if they can hit that eventual $2 million price tag per launch. A lot of commercial satellites, aren't that big, and at least for now, like, okay, you could fly 400 Starlinks out of the Cape, or you could fly 200 Starlinks and do like some big dog leg, and it's like, who cares? It's like, you just send another one up, like, it's cheap. And so I think that kind of availability of like different options, and their profiles can be completely different too. Like almost all of the classic profiles, even Falcon 9, it's kind of just like this nice, it goes up a little bit and then this nice smooth arc, and then as soon as they get above the atmosphere, it's just like straight over. I could totally see Starship, honestly, they don't want to put the booster too far down range either, so I could see Starship pretty much just going straight up, a little bit over until they get up high enough, and the boost back and stuff. I'm not an expert on orbital mechanics, but I could see them going up instead of over as much, if that makes sense. Like they go up first and then over instead of like over.
Yeah, because I mean, the in the timeline of Falcon 9, it's like right after landing is whenever we get the good orbit confirmation, and that's like 6 minutes in. And I mean, the second stage is like double, triple the distance of the first stage at that point, but still, it's not that far in the grand scheme of it all. So. If it comes down, it's coming down over like Antarctica at that point. If it is not in good orbit. Yeah,
and I don't know. I think reliability will also 100% play a factor in all this, right? Like, I think overfly is going to be a bit like the Concorde for a while. Like, people didn't want the Concorde around because it made this big boom. Totally understand. Definitely annoying to have this big double boom over the entire country. A sonic boom is not just at the point it passes the sound barrier, it's a cone that follows the entire flight path. And so I think people will be equally apprehensive to doing more overfly stuff. It'll likely get big news, but Starship is the first spacecraft, I would say, it will become as reliable as an aircraft, just because that's Elon's goal. And he might not be right on the timeline or how stuff looks or how stuff works, but he's right. He always gets his mark. And so I think if it becomes as reliable as an airliner for say 5 years or so, and it's like as reliable, like Falcon 9 is like so reliable. We just had our 100th successful mission in a row.
Yeah,
that is crazy impressive. Successful mission in a row. And
I can't think of what the last one was.
That had an anomaly?
Yeah.
I honestly don't remember either.
We've had the landing anomalies, but that don't count.
Yeah, that doesn't count because that's not mission critical. Successful missions. But yeah, if it got to a little bit more reliable than Falcon 9, I could totally see people, in the space community, in the know, being more okay with it, and then that'll eventually trickle over into other people as well, being comfortable with overfly stuff. So I don't know. Good question there though. Will they be able to fly commercial missions out of Starbase? I don't know. Depends. As everything does in life. Well, hey, so while we're talking about the launch tower and the pad, why don't we also, I think we'll be very remiss if we don't talk about some extra extensions that got added to the orbital pad. Again, it does not look very exciting, but I promise you, this is all really exciting stuff. I'm going to tell you it's exciting so you think it's exciting.
Woohoo, exciting.
I have a theory, and I could be totally wrong. SpaceX could have totally had a huge plan for that all of time, but it just doesn't strike me as something the Starship program really does much planning. I basically, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, they built these big concrete and steel posts, 6 of them, I believe, that come out of the ground right next to the launch tower, and that's the mounting point for the orbital platform, or the launch pad, basically. And they made them I don't know, seriously, beginning of the year, maybe end of last year. I can't remember exactly, but they made them a long time ago, and they just sat there for months. Yeah. And in SpaceX time, a month is like a decade, and it's
it was
they've been out there for a long time. And so they're coming back to it now, and they've gotten through their first test. And the reason why it kind of got put on hold was because of SN8, SN9, SN10, SN11, SN15. All those tests were kind of sucking up all the resources.
Yeah.
But now that they have time to go back to these pads and kind of build out their infrastructure, they added what looked to be 20 to 30 foot extension caps to the top of these huge pylons, which were already 60 to 80 feet tall. And so I kind of wonder.
This is gonna be so tall,
dude. Every time I see a worker standing next to this, I'm just like,
how many segments is the launch tower gonna need to be? Whenever it's,
I think 5 is the best guess at the moment.
Well, it's already at 1. It's already at 3 right now, and I don't even think that will cover just the booster. Once you get that,
I think 3 should cover the booster, and then Starship would be the other 2 segments. Who knows? Yeah, the other segments could be larger or smaller because they seem to be getting progressively slightly smaller as we go up.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, but basically, I think what my little conspiracy theory. Welcome to next conspiracy theory time. Keep your tinfoil hats on. I kind of wonder if SpaceX has been really working on that sound suppression system and water deluge system, because that was a problem they had with what, SN9, 10? I can't remember. And was it 10?
Sure.
I think it might have been 10.
I think
It landed
so.
and SN10 almost landed. But they were getting like a lot of, no, it was a static fire. I'm sorry, it was a static fire. They did a static fire and it like wrecked the concrete and whatever like special rubberized material they put on top of the concrete to protect the pad. But I think they did like a full duration, Raptor static fire, and that's just like 3 Raptors. BFR is going to have 31.
31,
So like
just
over
simple.
10 times, over 10 times that amount of thrust and stuff.
God.
So I kind of wonder
and that's like
if
not just 10 times the amount of stuff it's got to handle, because you're multiplying
some of
that.
the stuff is squared.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. I kind of wonder if SpaceX had this preliminary, water deluge sound suppression system under this orbital mount that they were talking about, and they built the pylons for it. They did the static fire, and they're like, oh crap, none of this is going to work. And so they had to redesign it, and the engineers were like, man, I don't know, we need more space. Can we like dig out some dirt? And they're like, no, we already built the foundation. They're like, okay, make it taller. And so they're adding like these 20 or 30 foot stilts on top of the pegs in the ground. So I could totally be wrong. This might have been the whole plan, but it's just kind of funny that this is happening.
It's like those boots that you see actors wear whenever they're too short to be in a scene with somebody.
Yes.
It's just a couple extra inches is all you
the
need.
Rubber.
No, this just needs like a couple dozen feet.
Yeah, just a couple dozen feet. It's kind of funny.
Tell me about this launch table.
Okay, yeah. So that is a good question there. The launch table is also something I wasn't really paying ton of attention to, because at the end of the day, it's all just boring, rusting steel sitting in a parking lot in Boca Chica, basically.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like it's interesting, but when you like learn what it's about to do, it's like, whoa. So this is basically a platform that it's like at least 20 feet tall. Like this thing is huge, thick wise, like chonk wise. It's like, it's not thin. Maybe it's 15 feet. I don't know. It's big. And it's kind of a ring that has a bunch of space available on the inside, which we are imagining is going to be where we're going to be seeing all of the thrust go through for the Raptors. And so what it looks like is this ring is going to go on top of these posts that we were just talking about with the 20 to 30 foot extensions, and all that is going to be like, that's kind of going to be the launch pad, and on top of that is where they'll mount the BFR and also land the BFR.
Gotcha.
And underneath all that, we'll obviously have the water deluge system. But inside of all of that, we have these new pins, and this is like the first like rocket interface hardware I think we've seen for BFR, where like these are going to be the clamps. Either they're going to be hold down clamps that'll hold the Raptors, that hold the Starship until the Raptors are at full thrust, or they're going to be like support pins that like the whole thing will actually rest on. We don't quite know yet, but we'll definitely figure that out shortly, I'm sure. But they're going to have 16 of these, either hold down clamps or support pins inside this orbital ring, which the orbital ring is already like 20 feet tall or something like that. And it's all just pure steel, basically. It's just like angled, like reinforced steel. Jeez.
I love the fact that it's so high off the ground that they have an inside step section and an outside step section. That it looks like you could literally, it's like a little, you can make some houses inside of it right there, just kind of put some sheetrock on the outside where there's holes, and
Yes.
You know what? Throw that on top of the high bay and make it an apartment that we can rent on Airbnb.
I would not even mind having to leave every few hours because SpaceX is going to be launching these things so fast. I would not even mind. So that's kind of all it at the pad. I don't know. It'll be more interesting as they start putting all these segments together, and we get to see how they will actually fit together. But for now, there's tons of stuff just sitting out there. Just like, outside. I was talking to my dad the other day, who's in the aerospace industry, and he's been in that for his whole career. And I was telling him all about Starbase and how I'm starting up this new show. And he was like, "Oh wow, so like, you know, what kind of facilities do they have down there?" I'm like, "They're literally building them
They
in
got
tents and outside."
They got tents. That's what they got.
And he was like, it just did not compute. And it's so funny to watch his face. He was just like, rockets and tents? And, you know, he comes from, you know, a big aerospace company where, like, it's all clean rooms and, you know, the 10 years of thinking about it before we even talk about doing the part. And, yeah so it's just kind of funny to, like, SpaceX is just moving so fast. It's all out in the open. The last thing I did want to mention here before we get on to actually interesting news, which totally isn't more interesting than Starbase news, I promise. Starbase news is very important and very exciting, is the thrust puck for BN2. So the BN2 is the booster serial number 2, which we've been watching grow. There used to be a BN2 that we had for a little while, but then we went on to they started making what we called BN3, and then Elon posted a picture and renamed it BN2. So basically BN2 is kind of shared by two different pieces of hardware.
BN2 is more like BN 1.1 at this point, kind of like 7.1.
No, what used to be BN2 is kind of like 1.1.
Yeah.
It's, I think, a test tank at this point. So it's now called 2.1. I say it is called. It's not like SpaceX is labeling these things. It's the space community that's doing the labeling. So BN 2.1 is like a test tank at this point. And it just got moved onto the nose cone test stand the other day. So it's going to be doing some pressure tests, it looks like, to verify some stuff. But what was BN3 and now is called BN2 is going to be the first orbital test. So that'll kind of be the SN8 variant. I'm pretty surprised they aren't doing more pressure test ones because I don't know, 29 Raptors to start sounds like a lot of Raptors to lose if something goes wrong.
Yeah, well, it's not like they're going to put that many on it at first, so.
Yeah, at first, actually, they probably will. So.
What?
The first
Explain.
orbital.
The first orbital.
From what I can tell, it does not look like they're planning on flying a BN by itself. It will be mounted to a Starship. Yeah, this summer. So it looks like SN16 has a 50-50 chance of being the SN to actually do the orbital test, or it might be SN20, depending on how things go. Personally, if you ask me, people say 50-50. Personally, I say that SN16 was the backup for SN15. So I don't really see SN16 flying again or ever. It's already built though, so it'd be kind of silly if they didn't fly it. If anything, it would probably just do another belly flop. But anyway,
like if we go another 2 weeks without a launch, I'm sure Elon's gonna be like, "I'm getting bored. Throw it out on the pad."
Yes, please, Elon. Please give us another launch. I want to see this whole thing happen. But yeah, so BN2 will likely be paired with either SN16 or SN20 for its first orbital test. Now, I'm sure they're going to do static fires and, you know, all that, and heck, it might blow up and we might be on SN10 or BN10 before anything actually goes up. But as of right now, the current plan is BN2 will likely be the first orbital testing vehicle. Now, the reason why we think that is because we've seen a thrust puck for BN2. The thrust puck was delivered early this week.
It's chunky.
Chonky. So, anyone who's familiar with rockets will know you have these things called engines at the bottom, and they're not necessarily the bells that you see. It's the plumbing and stuff inside that you don't quite see as easily that's flowing that fuel through to the injector plate. But those are producing tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of thrust. And unfortunately, anyone who has tried to hold a water balloon with one finger knows that given enough pressure, certain materials will just bend around it. So you have to have like a really rigid thrust puck is what they call, but basically like a plate. If we're doing a water balloon analogy, get like a nice flat surface that can distribute the weight properly. So this thrust puck is extremely important, and actually the octaweb on the Falcon 9 is the thrust puck for the Falcon 9. The octaweb is like the structural heart of the entire vehicle. It is the most solid piece of the entire rocket, and it's going to be likely the same for BN2 as it is for Starship. So we saw the thrust puck for BN2. How many Raptors were on there, DJ?
Elon's saying thrust puck for BN2, 29 Raptors initially.
Yeah. There's a couple Raptors on there. Now, the thrust puck itself that we have seen so far only has room for 9, but people are saying those will be 9 gimbaling Raptors with a ring of 20 Raptors around that.
God.
And those 20 Raptors won't gimbal. I know. It's going to be insane. Yeah, so the thrust puck is huge, and it looks huge and everything, but, like, it's only holds 9 of the 29 of them. So there's going to be a couple Raptors down there.
I'm wondering what these big mountable holes they have are for, because there's only 8 of those.
No, that there's 9.
Am I counting wrong? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No.
Do you see the one in the middle?
2.
Do you see the one in the middle?
Gotcha.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. Okay. Glad I counted it, because I counted that. I was trying to figure that out too the other day when I was looking at the pictures. Like, wait, how many are those? Like, oh, there's our 9. Because at first I was like, oh, there's only 8 mount points, but yeah, there's one in the middle.
Now you know what?
So
that extra hole in the middle, like beside the one towards the side, makes more sense now, because I was like, why is there just this random hole not symmetrical something else?
Mm-hmm.
That makes more sense.
Yep. So the thrust puck, the thrust puck is what we're calling it. It has to distribute the loads, but also be able to pass the plumbing through down to the hungry raptors down below, because those raptors consume a ton of propellant, like every second, just immeasurable amounts of propellant. Obviously, they do measure them, but it's like crazy to think about. Like, those are what we would consider like culverts for roads and highways and stuff, just forcing propellant through it, breakneck speed. But all the plumbing holes have to be there, so that's why the thrust puck, you see those big holes there. Yeah, so it's kind of cool to see that we got that thrust puck, and probably the other big piece of information we've gotten from Elon over the past couple weeks is the fact that we have Raptor production kind of stabilizing, if not heading up to the stratosphere, which is good. Raptor production has historically been the big problem, the big holdup on any development with Starship. Obviously, you can't fly if you don't have an engine, and those Raptors are very, very, very specialized pieces of equipment. They handle chamber pressures of above 300 bar, which is 300 atmospheres, insane pressures, it's insane heat. It's a full flow stage combustion engine, so that means it's eating its own gas and using that as thrust. It's an absolutely, it is a marvel of engineering of just one Raptor. And the problem was their yields were pretty low as far as being able to make successful Raptors, and so because of that, it was taking them a long time to, actually get 2 or 3 Raptors together for a test. And actually, we had a few Starship tests that were all ready to go, except we're waiting on 1 or 2 Raptors to get swapped out or whatever. And so Elon has just shared with us that they're up to 1 Raptor every 48 hours, which is amazing. Seeing Raptor how this single BN2 test is going to take 29 plus the 3 on the Starship. It's going to be like 32 Raptors in one flight. And that also might be the test where we see the first vacuum Raptors fly, but we'll see. So it might have 6. Who knows?
Raptors are already pretty big. The vacuum Raptor nozzles are massive.
Park a semi in one of those almost. I don't know. Maybe just the tractor, not the trailer. But those are some huge nozzles. So we got high yields on Raptors, which I think is kind of the final piece of the puzzle here. Like, we have the tanks done to a point where they can handle the pressure. We have the ground support equipment going in. We have, pretty good skill on how to actually manipulate the landing and the flaps and all that. Like, everything's starting to get figured out, and I feel like the Raptors were kind of that last big piece where they weren't always 100% reliable. They're probably not going to be going forward. We're going to continue to get improvements, but each one kind of felt like it was hand-built and kind of fine-tuned to do exactly what it needed to do. But hopefully now we're hitting higher yields of 1 every 48 hours. That means like just about every 2 months we could have a full BN2 test, like every 2 months, just with that Raptor production. And that is a launch cadence that, like, it sounds like, oh, you gotta wait 2 months for a test, but like seeing where we were last year, where it was more of a field than a city down there, and it was nothing going on. It's kind of cool. So definitely good to see Raptor production up.
I'm excited to see what happens in the next month or so. I'm ready for another. I'm ready for a Starship update. I mean, I know we get to see everything as it is, but like, I want to hear Elon stand in front of 15 now that it's landed and actually have something like mid to late summer, since things are kind of starting to open back up. I just want to see a nice produced event. Then I want to see Elon get
I want
interviewed
you
by all
to
these
be
people.
producing this nicely produced event, DJ.
I would so love to do that. Oh,
Elon, hit us up. I'm sure
can't tell
DJ
you-
will give you the friends and family discount.
I can't tell you how many times I just like stalked SpaceX and Tesla's job postings page for like media production specialist or something like that. Just like,
Yes.
"Hey, I will move to anywhere you need me."
Hello,
Let me
the
know.
3 people who listen to this show. If anyone anybody over at SpaceX's media production team, hit DJ up and hit me up on a certain documentary, because we got plans over here.
Oh, dude, that would be so fun just to work for
Yeah.
SpaceX though.
That would be kind of fun to do another.
I
guess-
wonder.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder. Because I mean, for their live broadcast, they have their engineers be the talent. I
Yes.
wonder who's running all the actual switching equipment and all the back end studio gear. I wonder if they just have their have engineers trained to do that too, instead of like actually hiring studio engineers and stuff like that.
I wouldn't be surprised if they could
I
just
never-
contract that out.
Yeah, but I mean, if they already have the talent being engineers, they do harder stuff than this. So
Click one of the 8 buttons on the
Yeah.
A10 Mini Pro ISO.
oh man,
Yeah. I don't know. So I guess I've kind
That's
of
an
always thought
interesting
that they just contract that video work out, because at the end of the day, they're not their primary thing isn't to do these live streams,
Yeah.
right? So it wouldn't make sense for them to hire, a team of a dozen highly skilled live production specialists at, $150,000, $200,000 a year, and keep
but
those
that's
people
why
on
I'm saying
staff.
I think it could just be their regular engineers. I mean, they just rotate.
I wouldn't put
through
it past them. I guess I put that, but
because they have
I
a
don't know.
full on studio build. It's not just like a
yeah, they do. Yeah.
So hey, you never
Or
know.
just taught the engineers how to run it. Yeah. Or just let them figure it out. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. So, SpaceX, please hire me as an engineer / media person.
There we go. All right.
Heavy on the slash.
That's
All right, so I
SpaceX.
think we're done with This Week at Starbase. Thanks for putting up with my shenanigans for 50 minutes. What? I talked about that for almost an hour. Holy
Yeah.
No way! Oh my gosh! I was wondering why my mouth was getting tired. Oh my gosh! That was an hour? No way!
Yes, it was. It was.
I'm sorry, everybody. I wasted an hour of your life. Wow, that is sad. That is sad.
Oh. Well, if it makes you feel any better for your mouth, we only got like 3 main topics for this section instead of like 5 or 6. So
Yeah.
be quicker
The
on
other
this.
stuff
It'll be
is
quicker on this
kind
one.
of scarce.
So, what do you want to hear about first? New missions, a Mars oopsie, or an ISS oopsie?
Man, I was really hoping you were going to say SLS oopsie, but unfortunately, I guess that's not what you said. So, I think we should definitely just do the new missions, because I heard that Mars is a nice place to visit.
Yeah, it is, but as one very, very nice person said, Venus is so very nice, NASA is going there twice.
Venus. Okay.
Yes. So this just
what are we
came
doing
out. This just came out today, I believe it was, or yesterday maybe. Eric Berger wrote up this Ars Technica article, but we are sending 2 missions, not 1, 2 missions back to Venus for the first time since 1994, I believe. Yeah. So the 2 missions names are Da Vinci Plus, like with the plus sign. And
Disney
Veritas.
Plus, Apple TV Plus, Da Vinci Plus. Oh, Oh, that's gold. I love that.
like-
Oh, only $10 a month for DaVinci Plus. If you want any of those footage or scientific data, it's a monthly subscription that NASA's putting out there.
Dude, with enough space geeks, you could probably fund a fairly small mission just doing that as a monthly subscription for like the continuous cause. But these two missions were chosen from NASA's Discovery program, and it was these two and two other finalists, which those missions were to observe Neptune's icy moon Triton, and also an Io volcano observer.
Ooh.
So those are the other two. They're eligible for future awards, so they could possibly get those missions later. But this is what DaVinci Plus will be.
Okay.
That's almost like DaVinci Resolve Plus or something like that. So it's going to sample the Venusian atmosphere for the first, or it's going to be the first to probe it since 1978.
Ooh.
Which, when you think about it, it's our closest planet. Yet we haven't been there since '94. So it will study how.
I think that was the mission that got the last atmospheric samples in the 70s. The Mariner program.
The 78 was the last atmospheric study of it. But it's going to study how the atmosphere formed and evolved, as well as determine whether the planet had ever had an ocean. It's also going to carry a descent sphere that will plunge through the cloud layers and thick atmosphere, taking measurements of noble gases, and try to understand why Venus's atmosphere is just so like yikes compared to Earth's and what caused it to be that way. And maybe possibly learn if that might be something that we're headed towards, and if it is something that we can prevent. Now, Veritas, on the other hand, is not a probe. It is an orbiter of sorts, so it will map basically the entire planet. It's going to be using synthetic aperture radar, which, I mean, we've heard a lot about.
Yeah, good old synthetic aperture radar.
It'll basically a full 3D reconstruction of the planet itself, and it will also do. It'll map the infrared emissions from Venus's surface to determine what these rock types are whenever these 3D models are made. So those are two missions. They're budgeted at around it says a cost cap. So I'm wondering what's going to happen and what they're actually going to cost eventually.
Cost plus.
Yeah. But $500 million apiece, which is not bad for.
You could do 2 missions to Venus or build 1 tower for SLS. I don't know. Which one do you want to do?
Which one will be more productive? So yeah, that is interesting. That is some good news. I mean, it's since 1994 is the last bit of data that we got. So we're sitting here at 2021, like 25, 26 years, 27 years actually, with no data coming back. And there's a graph in here in this Ars Technica article. You could see the amount of spending for the planetary program versus the amount of spending that was spent on Venus. In 1962, whenever the Mariner 1 and 2 program was there, it was around $300 million for the planetary program. Take that back. Sorry, that's 3,000 million, so $3 billion. It's about that was about
millions.
Yeah. So about $3 billion spent on the planetary program. Mariner 1 and 2 was like less than 500 million. Then you get over to the next big spike, which is around Pioneer Venus, the first Venus mission in the late 70s. That was around another 3 billion, with that being around like 300 to 400 million spent on Venus. And then you get over to Magellan. That was another 300, 400, but that was like less than $1 billion of total spending. Now we're back up almost to $3 billion again in 2018, and there was still from 1994 to now, no spending on Venus whatsoever. So
Wow.
to see $1 billion being spent on Venus alone, that's going to be cool. That's going to be a lot of useful data because, I mean, scientists have been waiting for 20 some odd years to get some new data. They've been looking at all this since the 70s and 90s.
Yeah. And there's some things you just have to go visit to experience. You can't see them from a telescope or from a...
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. DJ's popular. Look out.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I appreciate you finding that. I've been so engrossed with SpaceX. Who would have guessed? I totally missed that. And that's, like, huge news. Like, that's, like, on the level of, Ingenuity or Perseverance. Like, you know, these are actual programs that are going to be visiting places and doing, like, really cool science stuff. But then also just, like, proving out that we can get there cheaper, better, faster now. Yeah. And that's how space flight is working. You know, cheaper, better, faster. That's great. Yep. Well, speaking of Ingenuity, did you see a little glitch or bump that we had, a little bit itty bitty little problem?
Yeah. So let me pop over to that. It had an issue in its sixth flight. As I wait for this article to actually pull up. Luckily,
it was an anomaly. Come on, it's not an issue. It's an anomaly. It's better.
So
for some reason,
luckily it landed safe, and of course it's moving on to its next phase in its mission. And oh, wow, guess what? I cannot load the article. How great is that?
Okay. Yeah, shoot me the link and I can try to load it.
Yep.
But I'll fill dead space because I saw Scott Manley's video on it. Basically, what happened is little Ingenuity was up on his fourth flight. And for those of you who don't know, Ingenuity is the helicopter that was under the belly of Perseverance, the rover. You've been hearing so much about the Mars 2020 rover. Perseverance kind of pooped out Ingenuity, and Ingenuity went ahead and did a test flight. It's just a small rotary aircraft. I think it weighs 1 kilogram or 2. So very light, very small, and you got to remember Mars is practically a vacuum. It has like 1% of the atmospheric pressure that we have here. So just it flying was an impressive feat. So Ingenuity is just a technology demonstrator. Was never really designed to do any actual science beyond just proving that you can fly in Mars, you know, given the constraints of no atmosphere, basically.
Yeah.
And so Ingenuity proved its flight worthiness over the first three flights. It went ahead and did, you know, a good job with those 3 flights, and so they were extending it into now a science-based mission. Yep. Where Ingenuity is not just going to take off and land. This time it took off, went a ways, about 80 meters, and then it came back and landed again. And that's when we had the anomaly, and maybe DJ has that pulled up by now, and maybe he doesn't.
So basically what happened was it just kind of lost track of time, sort of. So it messed with the imagery timestamps and interrupted the flow of images from its navigation cameras to its onboard computer. So basically, part of its landing software, it just kind of like had a chunk of it missing, basically. Bits of it were gone, and it had to work it out itself to try to figure out how to land. So, like I said, luckily it's still there. It's still going. They're working on making sure that's fixed for the next one. And still good news from Ingenuity, first helicopter on Mars.
I'm always surprised at what JPL can pull off. Like, out of all of the traditional aerospace companies, I think JPL is probably one of my favorites, just because like they make stuff that lasts. It's not a throwaway thing. Like, their stuff is really hardy, and it's so impressive to see JPL have yet another anomaly, and yet the craft is fine, and we'll try again for another day. And I'm sure they got some really smart people working on some fixes for the software. But that's great.
So,
and have you seen the movie? This is actually my favorite movie, DJ. It's called Gravity. It's super realistic physics. Definitely how orbital mechanics work.
Because I can fly in space with just a fire extinguisher, right?
Oh yeah, I saw that in WALL-E and Gravity, so it has to be a real thing. And also,
two's charm.
Hubble is at the exact same altitude and inclination as the space station, which is at the exact same altitude and inclination as the Chinese space station. So you know, don't ask questions, basically. Yeah. So Gravity. What was the problem over with Gravity? You know, that dumb movie we hate.
Space debris, if I believe. The Kessler syndrome, basically.
That sad moment.
We had in Gravity debris taking out the entire space station. Well, luckily that is not what happened, or you would have already heard about it for sure.
Actually, you wouldn't have, because none of your satellites would work anymore. Goodbye, stop signs and stop lights. Those won't work anymore. Go ahead.
So there was a debris strike on the Canadarm2. So this arm is 14 inches in diameter. So it's not huge. So it is absolutely a lucky strike, is what they called it. This is probably about 14 inches in diameter right here. This thing is probably about that big. That hole,
still a chunk.
Yep, it's still a chunk out of it whenever it's only 14 inches. So this happened, or they discovered it on a routine inspection on May 12th. Was reported on May 28th. So they're not sure if it like went all the way through or if it got stuck inside. But as of now, Canada has reported that it's no issues to the arm, no problems whatsoever. Everything's still going fine. So it looks like it kind of just embedded itself in some insulation or something like that. So, yeah, it's still working, which is good because we don't have a way to get another one up there.
Yeah.
And without the Canadarm, how are we going to fix the Canadarm?
All the deep questions there, DJ.
So,
I think a lot of people don't really realize that a lot of the stuff that's already up there is not just bare metal exposed to space. There is like a couple thermal blankets and some layers of insulation on top of that. And those blankets and insulation have been proven in a lot of ground tests and even in orbital, actual incidents like this one. Orbiting debris has a lot of speed and velocity, but they don't have much mass. And so they're very light, flecks of paint or whatever, causing this kind of damage. And yes, if it was a nut or a bolt or like something more substantial in mass, it would be an exponentially larger problem. But these little flecks of paint and stuff, yes, they're traveling at closing distances in the 40,000 mile an hour range if you get exactly opposites, which is rare.
Yeah.
But their mass is just so low that these thermal blankets, they get holes in them and stuff, but it doesn't actually penetrate very far down there, because as soon as it impacts, it basically just ionizes the atoms of both the stopping material, the blankets or whatever, and then also the paint chips. You just get ionized into atoms. They're just gone now. But because of that, there's not a lot of like follow through momentum, and so this is scary. From the fact that like we need to keep space clean and don't just throw stuff around willy nilly. You need to make sure all of your stuff gets deorbited. China, not over people. China. Still a little sour about that from a couple weeks ago. Just drop your second stage wherever. Who cares? No one will mind. But yeah, it looks scary and it is slightly concerning. But if that would have hit even the cupola, I don't think it would have had much of an issue. And again, I'm operating on almost no knowledge of what this thing was. If it was a paint fleck, I think my observation would stand. But if it was a bolt, I don't know how the Canadarm still functional if it was a bolt.
I mean, it looks like well, can't actually open that image, but I mean, it looks like you could actually see from a full picture of the Canadarm a little tiny black speck where it was hit. So, hey, I guess we're lucky.
Yep, we're lucky, and space station is still operational, still manned, longest running manned. Go ahead.
If it was still Dragon 1 days and that actually took it out, they'd be screwed on half the resupplies basically. So,
speaking of, I guess we do have a resupply tomorrow. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, we have a couple upcoming launches. So
it's CRS-22.
Yep, CRS-22 is going to be launching in roughly 14 hours for us. Nice. It'll already be launched by the time this episode goes up, unless like Nick just goes Speedy Gonzalez and it's out by sometime tomorrow morning.
I don't know. You have good internet, so we'll see.
We'll see what happens. Then we also have another upcoming Falcon 9 launch. Falcon 9 Cirrus XM8. So that's going to be in 3 days on June 6th.
Okay.
So 3 days and 49 minutes. And then, of
Set
course,
your watches.
we've got a bunch of other launches from from a few different companies. The next one after that, that's pretty notable, is Firefly Alpha's maiden flight.
Ooh.
So
Really? Nice.
don't know
Finally.
much. Yeah, I don't know much about their maiden flight, but
Nobody does.
yeah. So hopefully we might know some stuff that we can talk about in the next episode, because that should
If
be
there
like
is
right
one.
before.
Given our track record, if there is one.
But hopefully we can get some more info on that before the next one, or maybe the next one after that, for if we can actually get some afterwards. And then the last upcoming Falcon 9 mission in the next month is the GPS-3 SV05, which is in 2 weeks. 2 weeks in half a day. So.
Nice. I have a friend who was working on that program. That's pretty cool.
So yeah. That is it for SpaceX launches and then interesting
All
launches. Everything else is just kind of filling the calendar.
Yeah, we
So-
definitely have.
Actually, we got Launcher 1 in a little less than a month too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
They're doing another launch. June 30th. Window starts. Not bad.
Jeez. Wow. That's awesome. I got stuff coming. Look at that. Fancy.
Exciting month and a half or so we got coming up.
Yeah. Got plenty of stuff to talk about.
Yep.
All right, DJ, do you have any closing thoughts?
Well, I don't think so. I just guess I
that
gotta
was
wait to
quite
see what
the whale
happens
there.
tomorrow at Starbase.
Yeah, we'll see what happens tomorrow at Starbase. And I will say, I think I'm checking on our channel right now, but I think this might be a record for the longest show we've ever done. Unfortunately, no. I stand corrected. 2 weeks ago show was SN16.
Oh.
Unfortunately, that was longer by a few minutes. All right, well, I guess we're not breaking any records today, but it was a nice long show. Good news. Good talking to you, DJ. And sorry to
You
rant
as well.
about SpaceX for so long. All right, guys. Join us next time. See you in the stars. Godspeed.